Hey, welcome to the HVAC Guide for homeowners and pros live show. We are streaming to both YouTube channels, also to LinkedIn, to Facebook, to Instagram, all kinds of places tonight. So wherever you're watching us, please say hello and let me know where you're located. That's always fun to see. Let's go ahead and jump in our chat here. Hello to Gary. Says we have a good show lined up for tonight. Gary is optimistic. I need some optimism, right? So thank you for joining us, Gary. I am the only chili dog. I love your name. When do I get my free 454B canister for watching? Woo. I was hoping you would share with me. I would hope. I just saw an article in ACHR News where they reported that the shortage is over, the crisis is over, I think is what the article said. The shortage of 454B and the crisis is officially over, which just in time for summertime, right? The crisis is over just in time for your brand new heating and air system in June. Dude, what's up? Thanks for joining us. Ryan, welcome back. Thanks for being here. I actually do have an announcement tonight regarding me missing last week's show and multiple others, as Ryan has asked about before. And I want to make a little bit of an announcement, especially for those of you that do take time out of your busy Tuesday night to hang out with me every single week. And so I do want to make an announcement as far as that goes. Charmer Safai, I'm probably not pronouncing that, so I'm just going to call you Charm. I am now playing with my slide rules. Nice. Very cool. Yeah, there's so many cool things. You know, the slide rule's been around a while, but there's so many new things. I think we could have an entire show, if not an entire YouTube channel, just talking about all the new stuff. I recently did a video on the conduit tech. That was not a thing, and nothing like that when I got into this trade, where you could do a load calculation and just 10 minutes or so with a software like that. Tools, so many new things that we probably don't do a very good job of staying on top of that on my channel as good as we could. I think all the new tech, especially as we move into over the next couple years and we start seeing all of the new air to water technology systems start to come out. That's something that I probably could do a better job of, and I will. I'm actually gonna make a better effort on that, talking about some of the newer stuff. Emery, good to see you as always. How does the contactor power the AC unit? Well, the contactor does not power the unit. It is simply a switch. So, assuming that there is no any sort of switches between the thermostat and the contactor, a lot of systems there are going to be some switches in between the two, such as the control board. But let's just assume for a moment that the thermostat controls the contactor and the contactor only, and that yellow wire, which is the color that most technicians use because it says Y on the thermostat, that's your condenser power, if you will, low voltage power. And so that will send power out there and it will close that contactor. And then, of course, that'll turn on your motor and your compressor. Typically, with a typical residential single stage system, that's pretty much how that works. So hopefully that answers your question there. But yeah, say hello in the chat while you guys are saying hello and dropping any questions you might have. I do have as Gary pointed out, I do have some things lined up for you guys tonight, some things to cover. And before we get to tonight's sponsor, I do want to start off the show with my question for you. Tonight's question for you is, especially if you're a homeowner, if you're a pro, I might throw a curveball at you ask the same question in a roundabout way. But if you're a homeowner, do you have a maintenance contract of some sort? I don't think they're all created equal, just like I don't think every contractor is created equal. But are you on some sort of ongoing contract, ongoing maintenance agreement for your heating and air system? And if the answer is yes, then please tell me why. If the answer is no, please tell me why. I'd love to hear that. And if you're a pro, I'd love to hear your take on this. I have heard many different philosophies, many different opinions when it comes to contracts, especially when it comes to uh, you know, whether or not they're valuable, whether or not it's worth it for a customer. Never mind the whole private equity side of things and folks investing in your future business that you may or may not sell. That's not what I'm talking about, which I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But just from a value standpoint for a customer, do you believe that customers should even be on one? Let's see. Charm says the slide rule is almost 400 years old and is still a powerful tool today. It teaches you how to understand numbers and why intermediate calculations are important. Yeah, I used to work for a guy that, I mean, I think he used his slide rule daily, definitely weekly. I mean, it seemed like definitely regularly it was pretty worn out. The little he actually had the little, um I don't even know if you want to call it a tool, but the little mechanism, if you will, that would slide back and forth when he was doing his calculations. But that's pretty awesome. Susie, hopefully I'm saying that right, Susie Cabello, but I'll call you Susie if that's okay. I want to invite you to my new podcast about field service and HVAC. It's called The Dispatch. How do I contact you? We'd also like to be a sponsor for your videos. Wow, Susie, you're the kind of person that high five. Whoosh. Um, Feel free to reach out to me. All of my videos have an email at the end of it. So you can email that, or you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the two best ways. There's other ways, but that's probably the two best ways. So, but yeah, thanks for joining us, Susie. Steve says, my opinion is there's not much in maintenance in a heat pump except maybe to clean the outside unit. Um, Charm says, I own 8 slip sticks, 5 post Versalog 1460s, 2. I am not going to be able to pronounce these names correctly, but wow, so you have quite the collection. Everyone collects something. Um, I was actually at a house the other day where the homeowner um collected all these door knockers, which was kind of funny. So he had like different ones. He had like, ones with oyster shells and ones with it was like a golf club. It was all these different door knockers, which was pretty cool. Ryan says, Josh, what new technology or equipment that another HVAC brand has that you think is cool that is missing from your favorite brand? For me, it's the Tosot ERV mini split combo. Probably not pronouncing that right either. Tosot. I'd like to see this more. It's a good question. Ryan, you always bring the heat with the questions. I think I would like to see more of the brands, and I'll say that plural because I think this is across the board. But I would like to see more mini split options out there. Um, and I understand why we're limited on that, but I'd like to see some more mini split options. It'd be nice to have something that hung on the wall, or that you could drill a hole behind it and make it almost operate like a window unit, which I know there's units out there like that, but it'd be nice to see more options like that, or something that you could hang off a windowsill that, instead of having the floor models with the tube that goes up to the window, or a window unit. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it'd be cool to see some more mini split options, maybe more mini split colors, more I just think that mini splits are what they are, and I don't think they need to be, right? They could be more versatile than they are. And again, I think that goes for all brands as far as that goes. That slider is called a cursor, Charm says. No contract. I pay by the visit. No need to feel tied to a contract. It's just a way for them to attempt to lock you in. Ooh, Ryan's still bringing the heat. It's like it's like it's like to see more floor mini split options for accessibility. Charm says there is a YouTube vid showing some MIT students and slide rules. Let us just say disrespected the sticks. Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know if I could do it justice, Charm. And I know that I know my old boss, there were several things you could do with it, but he pretty much used it for, one or two measurements. So Charm is, on the slide rules tonight. Um, Let me do this because I normally do this at the very beginning. But let me go ahead and thank the sponsor of tonight's show. Um, I think a lot of small business owners don't think about this enough. And, and this company, Millstone Bookkeeping, it's actually owned by my wife. And she had a client not long ago that was a small business owner that just simply looking at their books, the very first visit, it was a free consultation. She was able to save them thousands, not hundreds, but thousands of dollars just from looking at their books and giving them some advice. So let's again thank the sponsor of tonight's show. All righty. Let's jump over to tonight's stories. I've got a couple that I want to share with you guys. But I think it plays right into um the topic for tonight as far as maintenance agreements go. And the reason I came up with this is I was in a class, if you will, for real estate people that are in real estate or affiliated with real estate. And the guy teaching the class was a home inspector, and he stopped for a moment and started talking about maintenance agreements. There's a company in our area that seems to have a maintenance agreement for everything, for all kinds of trades. And I would agree with some of you in that uh, I think there are some trades that maybe an ongoing agreement is not necessary or even valuable. Um, but I listened to this home inspector teaching this class give his pitch on maintenance agreements, and if I'm being completely honest with you, I thought he was wrong. I didn't tell him that, but I thought it was a little ignorant, some of the comments he was making about them. Um, and I'll say this: not all maintenance agreements are created equal. So if you have a maintenance agreement with a company and you are not getting any value out of it, they're not catching things, they're not you're still having, say, a breakdown after. Now anything can happen. My own company, we would do maintenance agreements, and there would be times when possibly we miss the mark on something, or just coincidentally they have a breakdown a month later. And in those situations, if someone was signed up for our what we called the VIP club, the ongoing maintenance agreement, they were part of our program, if you will. If they had a breakdown weeks later, we would come out for at no charge. That was kind of part of our thing. Uh, Now, does that mean it was always our fault that they had a breakdown? No, I think there were plenty of times where maybe we didn't catch something, or maybe we didn't. Again, we did everything perfectly, but there was just coincidence. They just happened to have something fail. But even still, we I wanted our agreement to be different. I wanted it to be valuable. And in those cases, we would come out at no additional charge to the customer. We did other things too. Anyone that was a part of our maintenance club, our VIP club, we offered them discounts that we did not offer to other customers. And they were genuine discounts. It wasn't it wasn't like, let's mark our price up higher so we can knock some of it off to make the customer think they're getting a discount. We didn't do that. I feel like you could, if you do things like that, you could get caught. I mean, just do good work and charge a premium price if you're worth that premium price, and you don't need to take advantage of people or mislead them, in my opinion. But I think my whole point in saying all that, and we're going to get to these stories in just a moment, but I think it just should be noted, and that would be my first tip, because I'm going to give you a few tips tonight when it comes to these maintenance agreements. And my first tip would be, make sure you know what you're paying for. Make sure you are getting value out of that. I go back to that local company that, they have an electrical maintenance program, a plumbing maintenance program, a generator maintenance program, and of course, heating and air, and so on. And as I said, I'm not sure you need a maintenance program for all of those. Maybe, just maybe, it's safer to have an electrician look over all of your electrical components, make sure everything's on the up and up, maybe run a thermal camera. But that's my question is, if you are paying them to do your maintenance, are they running a thermal camera, to make sure everything looks good and there's no possible breakdowns coming? It just kind of depends on what they're offering. And getting onto the heating and air side of things, I think if you could have company A come out and they just kind of kick the tires and they're gone in 10 minutes, or like with our company, an actual maintenance on a heating and air system. Even my best guy, and I'd like to think I was our best guy, but I don't know that I was. So let's just say one of our best guys, right? Our best guy, whether it's me or one of the other guys, even my best guy couldn't do a proper maintenance on a regular system. If you could get to everything quickly and not have to crawl in the crawl space and everything's just easily accessible, you're not doing it even in under 45 minutes. Not a proper one, you're not. That's why I would always laugh in these Facebook groups with heating and air guys, and they would say, well, I can do that in 20 minutes or 10 minutes. And I'm like, then you're not doing your job correctly. And I'm not saying do it slower. I'm saying to do all the tasks. We had I think it was like 32 things on a checklist that they would have to check off that they did a proper maintenance to that system. And I would check behind the guys sometimes. After they did that maintenance, I would go lay hands on some of those components and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to. So, again, I don't think every one of them is created equal. I see some more comments came in the chat. Let me jump over to one of the stories here. And this kind of gets back to what I was saying about knowing what you're paying for. And this story comes out of North Carolina. Shout out to Ryan. And it says a Raleigh homeowner who bought an AC unit. Now this isn't a maintenance thing. We're going to talk more about that. But this is a homeowner that may not have understood what they were signing up for, literally what they were signing, and so on. It says a Raleigh homeowner who bought, and it says bought in quotations, AC units learns lesson in reading the fine print. And that would be my next tip as we go through this story. I don't know how I can get all this stuff, this junk on the screen. I got this news company. They've got all kinds of pop-ups up here. But my next tip I would say is I don't even know that you need to sign anything. We didn't have for my maintenance agreement, we had a little thing they would fill out. But there was no fine print to even read. They could cancel at any time if they felt like they weren't getting the value, or we were up to something, or they could get a better deal elsewhere, or whatever. There was no fine print. And so I would say that would be my next tip. Don't sign anything. If you're signing something, stop that. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger so you guys can see what I'm seeing. It says in Raleigh, North Carolina, with temperatures sizzling, many North Carolina residents are relying on their HVAC units to escape the heat. When Anna, I'm not even going to try to say that last name, and her husband's air conditioning unit went out in their Raleigh home in July of 2024, they invested in two new HVAC units. They called service experts of Raleigh, and the plan they offered sounded appealing. No money down, preventative maintenance, all of these, like pros of the program. You can make payments. You don't have to pay $20,000 up front. They signed a contract to make monthly payments on their two new units. According to the contract, it's called the Service Experts Advantage Program. It was basically laid out as it's like a car payment. It says like a lot more than that, but anyway, uh, you end up paying a little bit more over time, but then it avoids the upfront costs. They made payments for the last year under the terms of the program and said she never thought anything of it until they listed their home for sale and reached out to get a payoff on the two units. They told my husband, I think $31,000. They told me 35. And they said it could go up, it could go down. We really don't know. What? Now let me just say I'm just reporting an article on the internet. So before this company wants to come after somebody, I don't this is everything I say is just my opinion. I'm not slandering anybody, and I'm just reading a news article. So let me just go ahead and get that disclaimer out of the way. She didn't understand why the payoff was so much. I thought 26,000, we paid 5 or 6 already. We were anticipating 18 to 20 left for the payoff, but she said, "Oh well, it's in such and such page of your contract." After having the contract emailed to her, they saw that the husband had signed the Advantage Program agreement. Looking through the contract, she said it's shocked to learn that she had been leasing her two HVAC units for the past year and never actually owned them. So this is one of those lease programs we've heard about. We've talked about that on our channel. Some of you in our chat have even said you like those programs for one reason or another. It sounds like this may be a situation where that program is not ideal. They claim that this was never explained during the initial installation. The word lease was never used, she said. She filed a dispute with service experts regarding a payoff. She later received an email explaining that it's a lease to service agreement for the installed equipment. They explained, and it also, all right, blah, blah, blah. Let's get through this. I think the point here, guys, again, this says, she said, just be on the lookout, read the fine print, and ask to see the entire contract before you sign it on an iPad. I think that's a great tip. There's going to be our third tip tonight. We're not signing anything on iPads. If that company can't do, if they can't do a contract and they can't print it out and hand it to you, oh Josh, you're just old school. No, let the people read what they're signing. Print it out, hand it to them, even if they're going to get the final signature electronically, hand them a contract so they can read it. I think having an iPad, I think that some folks, they're going to feel weird about saying, let me hand this to me. Let me read through this. I know some homeowners won't have a problem saying that, and maybe you shouldn't, but I think your rule should be, I'm not signing anything on your iPad because I don't know what I'm signing. You could even hand me a contract that's 3 pages, and then I find out later on your iPad it was actually 10 pages, or I don't know. But we already know there's a bunch of bad apples in our industry. That's my next tip. We're not signing anything on an iPad. I respect companies that use iPads and they do business that way, but we're not signing contracts on iPads. If I was that customer, that's my next tip. No more iPad signing. Let's show me the contract. I'll be happy to sign it. I'll scan it. We can make it electronic, whatever. We can use eSign, AuthentiSign, whatever you want to call it. But we're not doing iPads with some salesman standing in your home. We're not doing that. Said service experts was given her a lower payout than she was originally offered. Giving her full credit for her payments already made. She is currently deciding what to do next. Again, the key takeaway is to always read the fine print before signing any contract. Amen to that. So crazy story there. What do you guys think? This is quite the conundrum, if you will. Let me see if I can get back over here to our chat. Let's see. All right, let me jump back to our chat over here, guys. All HVAC contracts I've seen promise percentage discounts on prices for when they find problems and fix them. You have to find them a monthly fee to stay a member. It's good if it's worth it. Steve says the attic to the garage, the filter was at the only return in the living room before the move. The installers told me to filter blah blah blah. I might have gone back too far anyway. Just trying to catch up on our chat here, guys. While we're on live show, Steve says, I live in Florida. I have so many issues. Once I bought this house with the AC, old ductboard and such, only one return. They added 3 now, 1 in each bedroom. Nice. Did that make a difference, Steve? I know you and Ryan were kind of chatting back and forth there, but yeah. Ryan says, I think those companies in North Carolina with experts in their name are almost always affiliated with Linux in some way. I was offered this from a contractor once and laughed. Leasing can lead to liens. Yeah, I mean, I think leasing or owning could lead to liens, especially if you're financing, you haven't paid it in full. But the lease programs, I think just getting back to on topic is read the fine print, because there's probably pros and cons to doing it both ways. And I actually think some of these programs that some of these companies have come up with, it's kind of clever, I guess. But I will say, I don't care what the program is. If you are buying a heating and air system worth 10,000 and you're paying it, once you do the math and read all the fine print, you end up paying 50,000. Well, that's not a good program. Fine print or not, that's not a good program, So just understand what you're signing, folks. Brian says, "What's up, Josh? What's up, Brian? Good to see you." So yeah, crazy story there. I thought that was interesting. I would definitely say some of the pros to getting back to our maintenance agreements topic of conversation. We talked about understanding that not all of them are created equal. And we talked about some of the discounts. Some of the other pros is, see if there's some other perks there. So I've heard now, this is nothing we did at my company, but I remember hearing that some companies offer things like $0 service calls if you're signed up for their maintenance club. What else? Some of them will say 0 or no extra charge for 24/7 service. So if you call them at 2 a.m. and you're signed up for their maintenance program, then it's no additional charge to send a technician out in the middle of the night. So, some of those extra perks is what we'll call them, could be a good reason, a pro, if you will, to be a part of someone's maintenance agreement. I think another pro is kind of obvious, and that is, especially if you're dealing with a good company, signing up for their maintenance program and having someone that doesn't cut corners and knows what they're doing, lay hands on your system annually and, clean it up, make it as new as possible again. That's the other thing. Are we talking about a checkup, or are we talking, because there are companies that will offer a $39 checkup? Well, that's a checkup. They're just going to check over things, see if something looks out of place or wrong, a possible future failure. So are we talking about a checkup, or are we actually talking about what we always called a tune-up or a maintenance service to that system, where they're going to go through the motions of making sure that system is as new as possible, it's running as efficient as possible. It's one of the arguments that I had with a contractor at my last job, and we were kind of talking about, he said, well, refrigerant doesn't, you can You just need to get refrigerant close, and it's, as long as you're getting a 20-degree delta T, then it's fine. And I understood kind of, and to go back and put it in context, I kind of understood what he was saying, but I would push back and say, no, no, there is a specific efficiency that system, there is a peak of efficiency that system could run at. So I think there's a perfect amount of refrigerant with the perfect amount of airflow, a perfect amount of maintenance, making sure that system is as clean as possible. And I think that would be my argument to that is you are doing that system and the customer a disservice if you're not doing a proper maintenance to that system and dialing everything in as perfect as you can, making it as new as possible again. So that would be some of the pros. Some of the cons of being on a maintenance program. Well, if you're on a program with a company that's not good, that's an obvious con. You could be, as one of you pointed out, locked into something, right? That's another con. That's a downside. Um, what do you guys think? What are some other cons to being on a maintenance program with a company? Um, I think those are probably the two obvious ones. If there are no perks, and if you're on a not so good program, Ryan says they promise that as long as you are paying the lease, they will repair and maintenance the system at the included lease price. So no scary high price fixes in the future. That's peace of mind for some. Yeah, that's a good point. Talking about the leasing side of things, I would also say that some of those, I would make sure that is in writing. If what you're saying, if they say to you, we'll never adjust the price. If you have a breakdown, we'll repair it. No problem. No extra charge. We'll make that system right. Um, and the price never changes. Definitely make sure that's in writing, because you're probably going to be paying for that up front. Let's be honest. Nothing's free, you know. Ryan says, I just want an honest contractor that listens to what I want and still provides their expertise. Just don't push things if I say no. Yeah, the high pressure sales. There's a guy that pops up in my Facebook feeds sometimes. He's got this whole program where he teaches contractors how to overcome objections, how to be a better salesperson and all that. And I'm like, I think I'm not saying there isn't a good place, or there isn't a place for someone to be good at sales and to try to point out the strengths. To me, a good product is a good product, and you don't need to overcome objections if you are selling something that has value. So the high pressure sales that some of these coaches provide, and it's not just heating and air, but they're certainly in heating and air space. I just think it's so unnecessary. If I'm open to listening, then by all means go for it. Yep. Yep. Good point. Good point, my friend. We talked a moment ago about the company that I was telling you guys about that have maintenance programs for all kinds. I do think there is value in, let's say you did have a heating and air system and a backup generator at your house. Well, I would argue that both of those appliances in your home, they do require regular maintenance. I mean, a generator, I don't know as much about generators as I do heating and air equipment, but I'm sure that, I think they have to have the oil change. It's a motor, they have to have regular maintenance done to that generator from time to time. And just like a heating and air system, there's certainly things that need to be maintained and cleaned and made new again. And if you find a company that's willing to provide more services, there's value in that, especially if they're good at it, right? Don't just sign up for it because they can do both. If you got to call two different companies, but they're both good, great companies to get, services done, maintenance is done to your different, things in your home, then do that. Don't just sign up for one of those just because the same company is going to do both. It's probably, you know, you know, there's good and bad employees at any company, you know. Susie says I agree 100%. Thank you, thank you. Ryan says I get always be closing mentality, but it comes off terrible at times. Again, I think if you're just high pressure, we should do a whole show just on the different tactics. I remember sitting in classes at certain companies where they would talk about, um, how to do some of these high pressure sales tactics. And like I said earlier, to me, not only if you're providing value, but I think there is something to be said for, like, I feel like I'm pretty good at sales from that a standpoint of I can point out things that that the customer needs to know to make a good decision. But I'm not good at sales in that I'm going to make someone buy something that they don't want to buy. I'm going to make someone sign my iPad and not read the fine print, right? That's not good at sales. That's being shisty. That's being, um, you know, it's just the worst part of our industry among others. Ryan says my Generac gets serviced yearly. A soft starter is a good upsell for HVAC companies if a CA generator on site. Brian says I've never had anyone sign a maintenance contract. The majority of my customers don't want to feel obligated, forced, pressured, or tied down to a contract. I never force the issue either. It's a good point, Brian. I would actually, as from contractor to contractor, I would actually say maybe take a look at your contract and see if there's something you could add more value to, like those discounts or something like that. And you don't have to force the issue, but offering something that your customers do want could play a role. And I think that's different for every market, by the way. I think there are some markets that, as I was saying, some of those perks like 24/7 service or discounts on this or that, or whatever the perk is. I live in an area that's very unique. I live in an area where I'm near the coast of Virginia, where a lot of folks will retire to our area, or they have a second home. If they are wealthy enough to have multiple homes, they'll have a second home where we live. So that is a unique demographic. I think there were services that I needed to provide that maybe someone that is working in the middle of a city, may or may the value might be different, right? The extras that you might offer to your customers that's a part of your program might be different. Steve says, you're from Virginia, which I heard is a home of the AI data centers who services their HVAC equipment with all the heat that's produced from the processors. I actually had a friend that worked for one of the companies that build and maintain those centers up in Northern Virginia. And, a lot of the heating and air side of things, the air conditioning systems are, commercial equipment, they're industrial equipment. Um, and a lot of them will maintain that sort of stuff in house. They can't be just on a list of service calls that day. They need, if something breaks down, someone to be out there right away. And because of that, they'll sometimes hire people and have them on staff. They always call me anyways when something comes up. Nice. Nice, Brian. Emery says, what is the worst install you have seen at your company? At my company, or that we installed? Or no, I think you're saying just something we've seen. I don't know if it's the worst one, but it's the one I always think of when this topic comes up. I remember years ago, this guy had put mini splits in his own house, and he had ran the line sets down the roof. It was like a main roof, second floor. There were mini splits, and then there was a like another roof for the first floor, um, and the line sets were run across, like literally sitting on top of the shingles, and it was very not just sitting on top of the shingles, but very sloppy. Very the line sets were going every which way. So that's probably the first one, or that's probably the worst one that I can think of off the top of my head visibly. I can tell you that some of you guys may be mad at me for this, but I know there were multiple times at our company that someone would call us to fix a system. And this happened more than once. I mean, it wasn't an everyday thing, but I mean, I would say once a year we would come up on a system, especially one that had been recently installed, and we would have to say to them, "Look, we're going to have to reinstall this properly. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's not done correctly." And we basically need to replace the system, although we're going to go back with the same system, but we're going to install it correctly so you don't have these problems. And obviously that's not cheap. Some folks didn't like, some folks were tired of the headaches. They had already had a few callbacks. The last contractors probably stopped answering their phone, or there was no contractor. The homeowner tried to do it themselves. And by the time we're getting there, and there were times that the customer would decline. Oh, you're just trying to get me or something. No, we're not. We're trying to make you have no more headaches. And I don't want the headaches. I don't want you to keep calling me back. We want to install this correctly now. Ryan says, if I called the contractor the first time, I'll call you again if you do a good job. That's the important part. I've had contractors try to sell me contracts before they even visit on my property. Interesting. That is interesting. Steve says, how many times have you gotten a call? Somebody says, I tried to do this DIY, but can you help me? Yeah. More times than I can count, my friend. More times than I can count. Brian says, I have also come behind horrible new install jobs. Remember, folks, you get what you pay for. Very true. Very true. Man, tonight's show is flying. Let's jump over to the other story I had for you guys tonight. Getting back to the maintenance contracts topic, because I think this doesn't just talk about heating and air contracts. I think it's just talking about construction contracts in general. But I like the premise of it in that it talks about knowing what you're paying for, knowing what you're signing, and we kind of talked about that a moment ago. So it says what homeowners need to know before signing a construction contract. Tulsa attorney LaShondra Peoples Johnson says homeowners should protect themselves from costly construction disputes by understanding contract types, key terms, and the importance of documentation. I do want to pause real quick. If you are watching this live, and again, remind you guys, I do have an announcement. I'm going to make that announcement as soon as we're done with this article, especially for those of you that do join us every week. I do have an announcement, so stay tuned for that. But it says before starting, first of all, where is this? I guess it's Tulsa. Yeah, Oklahoma. Okay, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Okay. But this attorney's in Tulsa. I don't know how. I've never been to Oklahoma. I've been to Texas a few times, but I've never been to Oklahoma. So I don't know if Tulsa is, without pulling up a map real quick, how close it is to Oklahoma City. But it says before starting any home renovation project, legal experts say homeowners should take the necessary legal precautions to avoid costly disputes. That starts with a solid construction contract. A construction contract is legally binding agreement between the parties of a construction project, which can include include property owners, contractors, subcontractors, architects, etc. Said attorney Peoples Johnson, blah, blah, blah. She outlined 4 common types of construction contracts: fixed price, cost plus, time and materials, unit price. What to include in a contract. This is actually really good, guys. Let me this is really good because I know every state is different, but in my state, technically, even for a $5 repair, you're supposed to have a signed contract or agreement um, for any work done for a customer. Um, and I'll be honest, most we didn't always do that at my company. Most heating and air companies, if it's a failed capacitor, you're not going to have a signed contract between, both parties. But I do think that it's important, especially when we start talking about some big ticket items, to have a contract in place. She stressed the importance of including key terms in any construction agreement, scope of work, a detailed explanation of tasks and responsibilities, timeline, payment terms, change orders, warranties, and guarantees. Everything you say verbally, make sure it's in writing, she said. I second that. I can't tell you how many times I have had to say to a customer, please, I'm going to send you an email and I want you to respond with what you just said. And they would say, well, what do you mean? I'm telling you now. And I would say, look, this is on me. And I would take the blame. I'd say, I don't want to get to the end and me say that I don't want me to say, oh, you said 2 days. And then you say, no, I said 3 days, right? You're telling me 3 days. I don't want to be the problem. Go ahead and send me an email that says 3 days so we can, let's just have something, a paper trail here. So we don't hate each other at the end of this. We love it. I want you to be happy that you selected us, right? She added that documenting conversations, agreements, and changes is critical. Avoiding legal disputes when drafting a contract, homeowners are encouraged to anticipate potential issues, be clear and specific with terms, and seek legal advice before signing. You'd rather pay an attorney upfront to review it than deal with a financial mess later. Yeah, I I don't know if I agree with that 100%, and here's why. I've had attorneys bleed me just uh to even look at a contract and or make changes to a contract, negotiate a contract. And I'm not saying they're not worth what they're charging, but I can tell you that you don't need an attorney for all agreements. Now, I do think you probably should get one involved if it's a big ticket item and you don't know what you're reading. I think maybe it's a good idea to have legal advice anytime you don't know what you're reading. You're not comprehending or understanding what they're putting in writing here. At the end of the day, just please don't sign something that you don't understand. If a project goes wrong, a contract can be terminated in several ways. A breach of contract, which is when a party fails to meet its obligations. Insolvency, when a party cannot meet its financial commitment. Or mutual agreement, when both sides choose to end the project. That's actually, I would say that, there are a few other ways a contract could be terminated as well, but that's definitely the main ones, right? Legal disputes over construction contracts are typically handled in civil court, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So yes, again, just know what you're signing, folks. Make sure things are in writing that need to be in writing. And if you're dealing with a contractor, which I know a lot of you do, because on my website, newhvacguide.com, where we help homeowners sometimes through this process, I have actually dealt firsthand with other contractors who will not provide a a a contract, and that's a big concern as well. Be careful, be very careful. Okay, let's see. Going back here to our Steve says Tulsa is northeast of Oklahoma City. Mark says service contracts can cause more headaches than solutions for the homeowner, but work contracts should be common practice and include an estimate, in my opinion. It should not be that big of a deal here's the thing. When I had my business, if a customer said to me, hey, I really would like all this to be in writing, my answer was, great. I agree. We should have everything in writing. You know, I've heard people say, well, I remember the days when we could do business with just a handshake. I hear you, but what about those? It's not even about someone trying to get something over on someone. What about just those miscommunications, confusion on what was said? As I pointed out a moment ago, where one party might say, "Oh, I thought you said, 2 days." The other one says, "No, no, we said three," et cetera, et cetera. Getting all that in writing, I don't think it should be that big a deal. And I think even if it's a handwritten note that both parties have a copy of, it shouldn't be that big of a problem. It really shouldn't. If you are dealing with a contractor that seems to have a problem with that, then they may not be the who you want to do business with. If they're not willing to do a simple contract, then be careful. Please be careful. So that brings me to what I was saying a moment ago. I do have an announcement I wanted to throw out there, especially for some of you guys. I mean, some of you guys are here every week. Brian and Gary and Ryan and many others. Hopefully I'm not missing. Please don't take offense if I didn't just say your name, but many of you join me every week. You take time out of your busy Tuesday night, and I do appreciate that. But that said, some of you have probably noticed we've missed a week or two here and there. When I first started doing this live show, it was convenient for me to do the show on Tuesday nights. Tuesday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. And I did it later because I'm a little bit of a night owl anyway, but also if someone was on the West Coast, they could watch the show live. They could get off of work if they did get off of work somewhere around. Sorry, heard something outside. My ADD kicks in sometimes. I'm like, oh, um, but yeah. So it was just convenient for me to do the show on Tuesday nights. And as time has gone on, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I had a little girl. We have a little girl now. Tuesday nights can sometimes be inconvenient to be here, but I also want the original point of doing this show has not changed, and that is if I can help you, if I can, whether that help is an actual problem with a heating and air system or a homeowner and help you through that. I'm not a DIY guy, I'm not a fan of that side of things, but if you've got a contractor telling you something, about a dual fuel system and you don't know what that is, that was the whole intent of the doing this originally. And so I don't want to stop that, but I will tell you guys, I got to do something because it has become a little inconvenient. It's the reason that I have missed a few weeks here and there. And I don't want to lose, because some of you guys, the other side of this is you don't join me every week because you need help on how to program a thermostat. Some of you guys, we've kind of become friends in a way, right? You join me every week, we hang out, we talk about heat and air, new things coming, whatever. And so I don't want to take that away. And I will say, I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if I need to pick a more convenient time or if I need to just, go to once a month we do the show. I'm just not sure yet. So if you have a thought on that, I'd love to hear it. I will say that I have done the show on Saturday mornings a couple times, and the numbers, the amount of folks that join me on a Saturday morning have always been through the roof. Like I'll do a Tuesday night show and we'll have, times where we have about 20 people on here now across all the platforms. And once we add everything up, it's usually about 100 folks, people coming and going. And my average Tuesday night show, we'll get another, 2 to 500 views after that. But usually during the show, while we're live, it's usually around 100, 150 during the summer folks. So if I do a show on Saturday mornings, sometimes I'll have 100, 150 people live. We'll have 1,000 views on the video. Um, you know, and I love what Brian just said here, family first. That's really what this is all about. Uh, you know, it's putting my family first and just trying to make sure I'm doing the things I need to do on that from that standpoint. So I appreciate that, Brian. Uh, appreciate that. Charm says, what's the new plan? Saturday sounds good to me. Do the show when you can. It can be short notice during the day, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, no, exactly. And that might be part of this too. Emery says, mix it up. Don't commit to any one day whenever you are available. Gary says, thank you for what you provide for all of us. I will be sticking around for whatever you desire. I appreciate you guys. I'm going to give y'all one of those right there for all of you guys. But yeah, I think I might do a Saturday show coming up. I don't know if it'll be this Saturday, but just kind of see how things go. And but I do, whether we move it to Saturdays or just every other Tuesday or one Tuesday a month, whatever we end up doing, I don't want to just on a whim jump on live. I want to have a certain time that everyone knows that we're going to do the show, and so on. So that's kind of, I wanted to let you guys know. I didn't want to just stop being here and you guys wonder what's going on. I'm going to continue the show. We're still going to provide a place for folks to ask questions, and us talk about new things coming and have guests from time to time. The question becomes, what does that look like? And I can tell you what it doesn't look like is me here every single Tuesday night, unfortunately. So just be aware of that. I don't know if we're going to switch to Saturday mornings or again, just maybe throttle back a little, but we're still going to do it. I don't know. We're going to play with it a little bit. Ryan says, have a later show. Sucks for East Coast. I've thought about that too. I've thought about that too. In fact, I am a night owl. That most nights, I've thought about doing like a 10 p.m. show, but some of you folks, y'all got to be, at work the next day or whatever. And a 10 o'clock show would not be feasible if we want to have a lot of folks on here. Your audience will evolve with you. Awesome content, YouTube. Oh, thank you for sharing and congrats. I sent you an email. Thanks, Susie. Good to see you. And thanks for joining us. That said, as we wrap up tonight's show, let's do this. We all know there's bad apples in our industry, among others. If you know a good apple, a good heating and air company, a good electrician, a good plumber, do me a favor. Let's show some love to some good companies. Drop the name of that company and where they're located in the chat, and I'll have them pop up right there. So do that. Brian says, talk it over with your wife, get her input. It's priceless. Brian's bringing the heat now, giving some good advice. Yeah, I talked to a really good company the other day. I'll show them some love. There's a company down in Gloucester, Virginia called Link, and I had a really good conversation with the owner. Well, it's actually I guess it's a husband and wife team, and I had a good talk with the wife, and just kind of talking. And one of the things I remember her saying to me, she said, look, we don't do flat rate pricing. And I'm not saying flat rate pricing is bad, especially if you, do that. Sorry, I'm getting a message here. I just want to make sure I understand it. But so I'm not saying that is bad, but she was just kind of saying, we don't do flat rate pricing. We do it this way instead. And we take good care of folks and we don't cut corners. And some of the things she was saying, I was like, this is a really, these folks have their head on straight, their heart's in the right place, and they're taking care of their customers. So shout out to those folks. Link Mechanical in Gloucester, Virginia. Susie says, oh my gosh, I don't think I can pronounce that. Susie, Paisan Chan Plumbing and Heating in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Awesome company. Shout out to those folks. Every time I see Scranton, I think about that show, The Office. I'm such a nerd. I am a customer and I don't work there. Nice. I like it. Shout out to those folks. Brian says Valley-wide home improvements in Fresno County, California. Shout out to Valley-wide. Good enough. Well, why don't we do this, guys? I will be in touch. I don't want to tell you that we'll be back next Tuesday night because we're going to be pivoting in some way, but keep an eye on the community tab on our main YouTube. I try to put it everywhere, but definitely on the HVAC Guide for Homeowners channel. Keep an eye on the community tab, and we're going to do something. We're going to move the show to a different time, or we may throttle it back. But whatever we're going to do something to where we're still here, we're still helping folks, we're still going over new stuff, and we're still having guests, some of the top folks in the industry. And that could be you. We've had a few of you mention or jump in here. So that said, have a great. I usually say make it a great week, but make it a great whatever span of time until I see you again. I appreciate you all. Have a great night. Take care.